Chapter 3 Coming Home. Spring was Zai's favorite time of year. The swarms of freshly hatched flies, the smell of carrion flowers on the breeze, the baby birds fallen from their nests, making small pink feasts for the ants along the footpaths. Even so, there was a certain lightness to her step, brought on by more than the season. Today, her usual rage was cut with a giddiness that she had never felt before. By day's end, all the pain and anger she had carried for her entire life would be gone. Zai was used to the calm before the kill, the adrenaline sharpening her senses into the point of a sword and focusing her on the carnage that lay ahead. But this time was different. This little nightmare's dreams were all about to come true. I guess it makes sense, she thought to herself. It's not every day you get to kill your mother. Unless something went horribly wrong. Zai was feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Nerves. She was so close to the end of her journey, but it wasn't over yet. What if her information was flawed? What if she wasn't there? Killing Auntie Zhang, the Ji family's nanny and wet nurse, who had raised her like her own, only to sell her to those filthy childmongers, would fill the aching hollow in her soul. Without the absolution of blood, her life would be too desolate to consider. A shiver ran down her spine. The path broke from the forest, and she came upon the small village. This had once been her home. It didn't seem right. She had been so small. She remembered thatched houses, cobbled streets, and clothes drying on crooked fences. Charm! But all Zai saw now were peasants shuffling in the dirt. She had lived long in the city and missed the crowds, how everyone turned a deaf ear whenever the screaming started. Everyone always so hurried and expendable. Here all she could see was one man, crippled and poking in the mud with his crutch. She approached him, putting on her best lost little girl voice, but all she heard was a haunted doll. "Please, sir, does Ai Zhang live near here?" The stranger, an old man with a mangled foot, gave her a mournful look. "Yes, you see..." He started before giving up with a shrug. He beckoned her to follow before turning his back and limping away. Zai wondered what had made the man so nervous. Must be scared of strangers, she thought. The old man brought her to a hovel not more than 5 minutes off the main road. It was surrounded by filth, hungry pigs rooting outside, but the thatch on the roof was thick, and real glass was set into both windows, a sign of prosperity among the peasants. As soon as he had shown her, the man hurried off as fast as his clubbed foot would carry him. Zai was surprised to see a press of backs up against the windows, steamed over from cooking fires and body heat. This was not the empty lean-to that she had imagined, a miserable refuge for a miserable woman. Instead, when she pushed open the door, the warmth and sound of voices hit her like a wall. Crowded together, she found 15 people, young and old, gathered inside the cramped den. Some sat cross-legged on the dirt floor, while others perched on chairs, all of them quietly sipping tea. Many had tears drying around their raw eyes, others hugging their fellows close with the joviality of drunkenness. The room was heavy with the sickly aroma of incense, tea, and wine. Candles cast flickering shadows on the walls. For a moment, the young assassin stood frozen in the doorway, taken aback as the house guests turned to her with blank, bereft expressions. "Auntie Zhang," Zai blurted, ready to leave. "I came to see her. She was my ama. I guess I'm in the wrong place." "Wait, dear," called an older woman, lurching up from a chair. "You're not mistaken. We're here for the same reason as you, to pay our respects to the deceased." The deceased. No, that was impossible. Too horrific. She had longed for vengeance against Auntie Zhang almost her whole life, never knowing the name of her hometown or even her own last name. She had learned those things, killed for them, suffered, only to learn she was too late. Zai had feared this moment so much that she hadn't even let herself think it could happen, not really. Panic started setting in. She had learned so much about her life before. She pictured herself as a baby, wailing as her pathetic father carried her into the wilderness. She imagined him trembling as he raised the knife, preparing to plunge it into her chest before bursting into tears, too weak to kill. She imagined her sniveling father handing her off to that grasping wet nurse, a woman too craven to care for a child when she wasn't being paid for it, and all too eager to pawn her off to the highest bidder. And so it was that she hadn't been killed, but sold to men to use as they wished. Her life stolen, not all at once, but in bits and pieces over many years, surviving only with her dream of vengeance. Now, her ama, the woman who had dared to act like Zai's mother, only to sell her, like so much livestock, in death had robbed her of even that. All the abuse and horror came rushing back, strangling her until a scream of rage ripped past the seal she was trying desperately to lock in place, the scream of a full-grown woman who had never had the chance to be a child. Her family, for that was who this ragged mass of sniffling fools were, after all, kin to the woman who had promised to take care of her, stared at her, terrified. Finally, the oldest woman in the room stirred and approached, offering a bowl of tea with her trembling hand. Who are you?" What she was really asking was, "Are you here to kill us?" Maybe. Her nerves were on fire. She needed to kill. She imagined a massacre, could see the dance of it, the movements of the blades, the blood on the walls and soaking into the dirt. It would not be vengeance, but it would fill the hollow in her soul, like it usually did, for at least a little while. But these might be innocent people. She killed for the Annika. All her targets had it coming, one way or another. She did not kill peasants for fun, or even to shed her rage. She would not stoop to lashing out at them just because they were there. So she sighed and told them who she was. She told the old woman, her grandmother, how she was effectively the dead woman's daughter, how Zhang had abandoned her to the merciless world of men, and even told how she had come to take her revenge. As she did, the others gathered, their eyes filled with tears. When she was finished, they apologized for not recognizing her sooner. They introduced themselves somberly, every one a relative of Auntie Zhang, each insisting they had never been aware of the cruel fate that had befallen her. Her ama had told them her daughter, she had referred to Zai as her daughter, had been kidnapped by outlaws. They had spent years searching, trying desperately to bring her home. Her brother Tarka, in fact, searched even now. She did not want to believe them, she needed to kill. But they were not the culprits, and had nothing to do with betraying her. They did not deserve her knives. "You are home now," cried her grandmother in teary joy. The whole family rose as one to welcome her, mourning faces transforming into open smiles. They pleaded with her to rejoin them, telling her a normal life was still within her grasp. But as her aunts and uncles and grandparents and nephews and nieces rent their garments at the wickedness of her mother, and talked over themselves about their joy at finding her, their faces began to seem twisted and monstrous. The more she listened, the more their stories did not make sense. They were talking too much. Or was she only looking for a reason to murder them all? Something was off. She probed, like her blades might probe an enemy's armor, looking for a way in. "Where did you think I could have been taken?" Zai asked as her heart thumped in her chest. "And when did you stop looking, and why?" "It's not like we believe that stupid prophecy," slurred a middle-aged man from the back of the room, whose red face belied a cup full of something stronger than tea. And there it was. A broad, warm smile spread across Zai's face. The fire raging inside of her quelled all at once. She had never spoken of the prophecy. No one had mentioned it at all. The only people who had ever known about it were those who were guilty of what had happened to her. As soon as the drunk had spoken, the room fell silent. Her family's tears ran dry, and their smiles gave way to grimaces of terror. The theatrics stopped. The performance was over. The whole family stood tense enough to snap, all except for her. Zai was serene. "Of course not," said the young assassin contentedly, the darkness receding and her body feeling light once more. Her relief was finally at hand. Only a fool would believe such superstitions. For a moment they seemed relieved at how calm she was. Zai had changed her mind. The little village was growing on her. Home is where the heart is. She laughed, pinning the 6th heart in 2-line over the entryway with a carving fork. She leaned back to admire her work, her smile as wide as it had ever been, and these decorations certainly help. Her drunk uncle's head sat on the windowsill, and his wife was cut up and arranged in pieces on the kitchen floor. Well, she assumed it was mostly his wife. It was getting harder and harder to tell them apart. Her grandmother, the matriarch, lay gutted on the den table. She was impressed by how well her entrails tied the room together. The others were scattered throughout, their blood splattered on the walls and floor. It was beautiful. It was euphoric. She had truly turned the house into a home. "So I couldn't kill my ama. That is a disappointment," thought Zai as she sipped her grandmother's tea, stirring it with a finger not her own. But this is the next best thing. She was so proud of herself that she could cry. She didn't, of course, but she could. Instead, the young woman stood up, upsetting a small pyramid of eyes on the table. She parted the flayed back of her aunt like a curtain, ducking under the hanging lungs, and out of the fetid hut to feel the sun full on her face. Her body felt so very light. Is this what normal people feel like? Is this what it means to be healthy? From now on, she would look forward, not backward. Out there, in the big, wide world, so many other guilty people were ready for a reckoning. Zai couldn't wait to get started on them. End of chapter 3.